Okay, so the point of these videos is just to give you some ideas of some movement drills or mobility drills that you can do on your own outside of training, which I've found, and I found that other people, when I've taught them it, has really good carryover to Jiu Jitsu. So there's the mobility aspect, obviously, but there's also other attributes that are gained in practicing these movements as well, which will have really good transfer. Okay, so we'll go straight in. The first movement that I think is really good is the 90-90 position. So for this position, we're going to turn onto one side and we're going to set our legs up at two 90-degree angles. So we're looking for a nice 90-degree angle at the back, a nice 90-degree angle at the front. Okay, so this position alone can be quite challenging on the hips and the control of the trunk, especially if you've got some limitations in the hips. So if you need to use a prop, so I've got a foam roller, but you can use blocks and books, anything that you've got, and you can just use this just to prop yourself up. So if you feel like you're falling into this back hip, just use whatever height you need to keep yourself nice and upright. So you can use one at each side if you need to, and just manage this position. Okay, so we're aiming for a nice upright torso, facing the front first, and we want to try and keep the knees down. So if the knees are coming up, try and just relax them down towards the ground. Okay, so this position, sitting in this alone, can open up the hips simply just by spending time here, but we're going to do some more active work here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hinge over this front leg. So when I say hinge, I mean we're going to lead with the belly button as if we're looking over the edge of a building, and we don't want to round through the upper back. So we're going to hinge over just as far as we start to feel some activation in this front hip, so in the back of this hip. And then we're going to use the strength of the front leg, so I'm pushing through the ground through any part of this leg that's in contact, and I'm going to push myself back up to this upright position. Okay, and then I'm going to start to incorporate the arms. So as I hinge, I'm going to start bringing the arms out in front, peeking over the edge of that building, and then pushing through the floor, coming back up to that upright position. So you want to control the movement down and control it up. So we're not using quick motion where we don't get any activation through the muscles. We're really trying to hinge, control that motion, keep the spine nice and long, keep the core engaged, and then lift through the strength of the hip. So you want to build up to roughly 10 reps for this first movement, and then you can progress from there with sets of 3 or whatever you feel like you need. Okay, so that's going to work the external rotation of this hip. To progress that further, we're going to do some hovers. Okay, so this will build the strength of the hip up even more. So for this, we want to use the fingertips or the palms in the ground. If you've got long arms, you can use the palms. For me, if I use my palms, I tend to slouch. So if you're a bit shorter limb, just use fingertips in the ground so you're nice and upright. We're going to generate full body tension. So we're going to push into the ground through the fingertips, really pushing through the legs, almost as if you were trying to hover yourself off the ground. Engage the core, and then we're going to try and lift this front leg. So I'm keeping the torso still, I'm not leaning to one side. I'm just pushing through the ground and then lifting this front leg. Okay, so it should feel quite taxing. So we're going to lift, and we're going to do this again for 10, trying to control the motion. So when you first do this, you might feel like the leg is just flying down. That's fine, but we're just aiming to be able to control that range. Okay, so lift. Try and think of the leg staying level, so try and lift that foot as well, so the foot's in line with the knee, and then lower it down nice and slow. So again, working for 10 with that movement. Okay, next one, progression again. So if this is already enough for you, just stick with those for now. If that was fine, you can carry on to this next one. So again, we're going to use the connection through the floor. So we're pushing down, engaging through the core. We're going to lift just as we did in the last drill, and then we're going to extend the leg out, keeping it off the floor at all times until it's fully extended. And then we're going to try and turn the laces of the foot up towards the ceiling, and then control it back, hovering it off the ground, and then replace it down. If you want to make it a bit more challenging, you can add in an object to try and lift the leg over. So for me, I'm just going to use the foam roller again. I'm just going to lay it in front of the leg, push through the ground, and I'm going to lift and hover it on top. Come round, try and get them laces up to the ceiling best you can, and then come all the way back. Okay? So again, working for 10. And then we're going to leave that front hip for now. So we've worked the external rotation of this front hip, and now we're going to go into the back hip. So now we're going to work the internal rotation. Okay, so for this one, first we just want to get used to being in internal rotation. It's not a movement or a position that we work often. Okay, so if we're just going to get used to feeling the sensation of internally rotating the hip. So we're going to just do a snake bite grip on that hip so that we know that this is our axis that we're pivoting on, okay? And then from here, I'm going to think of sinking this bum cheek down towards the ground, okay? So this might feel strange, might almost feel like the hip's going to click. Just relax into the position. Nice deep belly breathing at all times. And then from here, we're going to push through this hip and rotate back, forward. And we're just going to move through this. So we're trying to sink that bum cheek down towards the ground, and then we're going to rotate back forward. So we're just starting to get some heat and motion in that hip joint. So you can do this for time or just for reps, just starting to feel out that range of motion. Okay, so once you've felt the feeling in that hip, we're now going to start to activate this position, okay? So this is quite a challenging motion for most people. So like with the front leg, we're going to hover this back leg. So we're going to, again, brace into the floor, keep the torso upright, so try not to lean too far forward with this one, okay? And then we're going to try and lift this back foot off the floor as best you can, okay? So it might not actually move. That's fine, as long as you've got the intention of moving that leg. So we're going to just lift as best as we can off the ground and then control it down. Once you've done a few of those, we're actually going to use our arm to lift this foot up. So we're going to bring it up, and this is our passive internal rotation. So it means I'm using force to bring this leg up off the floor. I'm not using the strength in the hip. And what we want to do is minimize the difference between our passive and active range of motion. Okay, so I'm going to lift this up, feel out where I can internally rotate that hip when I use force, and then I'm going to try and hold the position as high as I can. The foot will drop, and this is my active range now. So this is where I'm in control of that range of motion. So I'm just going to hold and then release. Okay, so we do that a few times. We're going to lift it up again, find that range, try and hold as best you can. Hold for 5 to 10 seconds, and then slowly lower it down towards the ground. Okay, so that's a really good position for getting into the internal rotation of this hip. Once you've done those, you can progress this a bit further, and we're going to do something I call heel touches. So I'm just going to spin to the front for this one. So staying in the same position, we're going to think of bringing the inside of this back heel towards the top of this front heel. So I'm staying upright. You can use your prop if you need to on the side. Okay, bracing through the core. I'm going to try and lift this back leg first, and then bring the heel up towards the front heel, and then control that motion back. Okay, if you can do it with no hands, like I've just demonstrated, good. If not, you can use your hands in the mat as much as you need. We're just trying to limit this sidewards lean as much as you can. So bracing, lift that leg, bringing that heel up, and then keeping it off the ground all the way back to that 90-90 position. If you want to progress further, you can hover, bring it out into full extension, and add in some axial rotation. So here, we're trying to move through the hip joint rather than flicking the foot. I'm really trying to rotate that full leg, bring that heel up, and then rotate it back into our 90-90 position. Okay, so those are just some active mobilizations we can do in this position. And we're going to go on to some traveling forms next, but we really want to lock these positions down first, okay? So the great thing about this position is, like I said, the front leg's in external rotation, back leg's in internal rotation, which is very similar to a lot of positions in Jiu Jitsu, okay, where everything is rotational in nature, and this is why this move is so good for the carryover to the sport.